You're welcome to another interesting edition of the Economy and Politics Show, where we bring you key socio-economic development as it affects the household. This edition will discuss crude oil theft in Nigeria, the quest for a national emergency response. This is a continuation of our conversation from last week, which explored examining the anatomy of crude oil theft in Nigeria, understanding the graft, impact, and implications, which is a report published recently by Proshare. And at the just concluded 14th edition of the PSRG Richardson HSCC Forum in Lagos, we take excerpts on why there's a need for a national emergency response to crude oil theft. Before we go on to the conversation, let us give you a wrap of key stories from last week. Operationalizing the Petroleum Industry Act, declaring a national emergency on crude oil theft, and focusing on gas as its development to Nigeria's transition to renewable energy are key steps the nation must take to reposition the oil and gas industry. Engineer Tony Atta, the former CEO of Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company, made this point as a keynote speaker at the 14th PSRG Richardson HSCC Forum in Lagos. Also last week, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's headline inflation for August 2022 rose to 20.54%, while food inflation also rose to 23.12%, which was 2.82% higher compared to the rate recorded in August 2021, which was 20.30%. This rise in the food inflation was caused by increases in prices of bread and cereals, food products, potatoes, yam, and other tuber fish, meat, oil, and fat. The Senate Ad Hoc Committee on Oil Theft said it has begun investigations into oil theft and illegal bunkering activities in the Niger Delta region. Chairman of the committee, Senator Basi Apan, said this while fielding questions recently from journalists. And those are some of the key stories from last week. If you're joining us, it's the Economy and Politics Show, and our focus today is on crude oil theft in Nigeria, the quest for a national emergency response. This, like we said earlier, is a continuation of the conversation around this very ravaging menace and a build-up or follow-up to what has been released, the latest comprehensive report titled The Anatomy of Crude Oil Theft in Nigeria, Understanding the Graft, Implications and Impacts, published by Proshare. At the 14th edition of the PSRG Richardson HSCC Forum, which discussed the theme, the Nigerian oil and gas industry setting a new agenda, the keynote speaker, Engineer Tony Atta, former CEO of Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Company, made a profound statement stressing the need for the Nigerian government to declare a national emergency on crude oil theft in the country. Watch this video to understand his direction.
For me, the one singular element of this new agenda that must be addressed without a doubt, and is absolute no-brainer, is crude theft. This is of major concern, both locally and internationally, to the extent that there does not seem to be any quick fix solution in sight without government rising up to its responsibilities of securing lives and indeed livelihoods. It's a very important subject. I have followed active debates on the subject and note some of the preferred solutions, including socio-political ones and deployment of technology, which largely are about detection of the criminality itself. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want to detect? I was told an app has been launched to tell us where it's happening. When I was running operations about 15 years ago, it was happening only at night. Today it's happening broad daylight. And I hear even within churches and within mosques. So I don't think it's about detection. I think it's about a different kind of response, which I will talk about. What we need is a very robust response and deterrence and holding people accountable to ensure full consequence for these illegal activities. Government at all levels and across all arms need to, in unison, declare a state of emergency on crude oil theft and deploy technology to fight the crisis and deal more decisively and transparently too, as a deterrent to those involved in these nefarious activities and economic sabotage impacting all of us. This singular issue threatens our economic and energy security, and so must be dealt with as a consequential security emergency. In summary, we need to press the reset button as part of the new agenda to galvanize the oil and gas industry in a post-PIA world. The basic components of the new agenda can be encapsulated in the following suggestions. First and foremost, we need to take back control. We have to take back control. We're left with no choice. We must secure our oil and gas production territories. We must protect the infrastructure to create a more enabling environment by declaring a security state of emergency on crude oil theft and illegal artisanal refining activities in the Niger Delta. While it is encouraging to read about government's recent push towards tackling the crude oil menace, this needs to be sustained and underpinned by fresh thinking, including deployment of georeferencing and geospatial tracking technology and diplomatic cooperations across the Gulf of Guinea. We seem to have left this to just the Navy and the JTF. This is actually bigger than even Nigeria as a nation, and it can only, in my view, be delivered out of active Gulf of Guinea regional and international cooperation and partnerships with the EU, the United States, and even Britain to help proffer and implement sustainable solutions, including fingerprinting our crude oil and following both the molecules and the money in order to tackle this crude oil theft once and for all.
Welcome back, and of course, you don't understand why it is required that it's treated as a national emergency. You all know that Proshare has released a report, Anatomy of Crude Oil Theft in Nigeria, Understanding the Graft, Impact and Implications. And from the executive summary, it pointed out the fact that the redemption of the sector would require the federal government to be intolerant of crude oil theft and determined to stop it, including placing surveillance over its personnel and adopting top-of-the-range technology to monitor the network of domestic onshore pipelines. The executive summary also said there are no garlands for efforts, only results. And the report noted that the government must be purpose-driven and result-oriented to reduce revenue leakages from the activities of oil thieves and improve the country's debt-to-revenue ratio. Report writers noted that the hard work towards eliminating crude oil theft was not an option, but the only game in town. That last part is very definitive. And this brings me to a conversation exactly almost 10 years ago at a hotel, and WebTV was privileged to capture this event. It was a conversation around crude oil theft and illegal bunkering. And here's what a community leader in the Niger Delta, Chief Nengi James, had to say about crude oil theft and the need for a holistic and coordinated approach to it.
I don't believe in NATO. NATO, I feel, is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Nigeria is not a member. And I term it, I describe it, no action, talk only. We are tired of that. This is action time. Navy, when are you placing coffee along the coastal line? Let us begin to talk something. Navy, Operation JTF, what are we doing? Let us put some hours coffee. We know the time that these things are being done. It may be from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. From this period, so vessel are not allowed to pass through the coastal axis. They mount in our axis. We have the Tuambras axis, we have the Okpoma axis, the St. Nicholas, the Brass River, and St. Bartholomew. Block these areas. You will see that it will, but to a large extent, the JTF commander is aware. I asked him so many questions that cannot be answered. Sometimes you are going to report the same people, some persons, not me. You're going to report the same persons at the JTF, and you will see them drinking tea with JTF. These are minor people at the locals. But who are the big thieves? From my Jota there, I have the oil co-workers team, the foreign partners and their experts, and we have the NNPC, we have the security agencies, and we have the locals. The locals are to make their ends meet. As far as I'm concerned, my team are reported on spot, reported a JTF team that was protecting oil thieves at a place called Elepa, and reported same to Ajib team at Terminal. They came and arrested those people. I thought the JTF commander would displace those military men that was trying to help them to steal the oil. So it's a very wonderful issue. It's a cartel. It's a cartel from the presidency, politicians. Politicians are part of it. Government, top government officials were part of it. You may surprise that within the system, The senators are part of it. The ministers are part of it. So what are we talking about? These calling names that the young... Look, all the drums. About how many drums that make a barrel? But the ones we are talking about, you are aware of the African pride issue. Start from the Navy. So what are we talking about? If the Navy are serious, the Pulo shelf is restricted to the coastal area. If they are serious and they place their warships along these rivers on surveillance and 24 hours guide, who will pass to the Atlantic Ocean?
You can see, just like Engineer Toneta has said, and of course, almost 10 years ago, the need for a national emergency response, coordinated approach, and robust framework to address this crude oil theft is really very important. Nigeria needs an national emergency response to approach this. The current menace of crude oil theft. And again, we got Mr. Chukwuemeka Osuji, Director, Oil and Gas, Olayiwanda LP, to look at what approach must be deployed to secure our oil and gas assets in the country.
In terms of emergency response, I think the right steps are being taken at the moment. And one of those critical steps is to engage some of the critical stakeholders in those localities where those assets are situated, and to get them to be more directly involved in policing, checkmating, and then finding a way to at least curb some of the huge losses that we're seeing. But that's, as you said, is an emergency response. We need more lasting solutions, and then it need not be one solution. It could be a combination of solutions. But I think that the government and the various stakeholders are working together to now try to come up with what might then be more lasting solutions, more enduring solutions, and also, in particular, we've noticed the lapses with the security architecture in terms of the ability to police and to monitor those infrastructure. So in addition to what has already been put in place, it's also important to ramp up the capacity of the security agencies to monitor what's been put in place, and not just to ramp up their capacity, but to get them to develop that sense of not just belonging, but that sense of ownership. Because these are federation assets that we're speaking about. The losses, the revenue losses is for the entire nation, and everybody's feeling the implication. So I think a combination of approaches will be optimal at the moment. The first step is really to engage some of the key actors who play within that space, and to say, hey guys, let's come together and make sure we can curb some of these losses. So I think with this and more, hopefully we'll be able to get more lasting solutions to the challenges.
So far, here are the steps that we know have been taken to address crude oil theft. First, the federal government set up a committee to tackle crude oil theft. The Senate, as we read earlier, has set up a high-level committee to also wade into the crude oil theft issues. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has developed an app which is designed to detect crude oil theft and other illegal activities. Those are some of the responses so far. Beyond the steps taken by the government and state oil company, Nigerian National Petroleum Company, now a private firm, Proshare, also through this report, has recommended a robust national maritime strategy that brings together the security agencies and all stakeholders in what can be described as the blue economy. You could understand and relate with that based on what the Engineer Toneta and of course Chief Nengi James has said, a holistic approach, a blue economy opportunity, which Nigeria needs to really leverage. And just to state once again, the threats of not addressing the crude oil theft drastically have dire consequences. And here they are. First, economic. Revenue dip because of the low volumes in crude oil production. Issues with foreign exchange inflows because crude oil is still a major source of foreign exchange inflow. Low investment in the oil and gas sector. We're seeing a lot of divestments, and this is why it's a major challenge. And of course, the fear or concern of job losses in the industry. For the security part, stability in the oil-producing Niger Delta Belt remains a concern, and of course, the potential that if it's not addressed, it could snowball into a national crisis. This is something, major reasons why we should take crude oil theft, the menace, seriously. So what's the take-home point? These are challenging times for Nigeria, as the major revenue source for the country is presently challenged because of the menace of crude oil theft. As the nation prepares for another general election, I agree with all the conversation that there's a need for a consensus among the politicians, the elites and host community, and of course security agencies on the protection of critical oil and gas assets as a big way forward. But this is something that we must take very seriously. Any national emergency declared without a consensus to address this menace will only be another revolving trip with no headway in curbing crude oil theft. And that'll be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can follow our social media platforms to get further updates on the latest report published by Proshare, Anatomy of Crude Oil Theft, Understanding the Graft, Impact and Implications. Visit our website, www.proshare.co, to read our latest news stories, articles, and of course, the report we talked about. And for this report, it's a major talking point in the country. Everyone's discussing around it. And if you want to read executive summary and also other details, it's displayed on the screen for you how you can get this very, very robust report. We also appreciate if you can send your views, suggestions, or questions around this report and the conversation on the need for a national emergency response to crude oil theft. Thank you for the time, and of course, till we come your way again, have a lovely day.